Happy Wednesday, everybody. This is Scott Pope, founder of CareerScript. Thank you for joining our Wednesday webinar series. Tonight's session is a meeting with Dr. Ruchi Tiwari of Deloitte Healthcare. As you're familiar with CareerScript, we offer you a variety of things as it relates to your pharmacy careers, specifically vision, direction, and accountability. What this webinar series is about focusing on that vision component and giving you access to see different career paths and people who have been down these various career paths. Tonight is in strategy and healthcare consulting, and we do a number of these. In the handouts, you'll see that there's you can download details on the rest of the series. We have 3 more sessions here throughout the course of the summer, and the recordings are also made available to you on the forum section of CareerScript after the session is complete. So it is my distinct honor to introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Ruchi Tiwari. Dr. Tiwari is actually a former student of mine and very honored and proud of what she's been able to do with her career. She's joining us here after recently having 2 wisdom teeth pulled. So we appreciate you being a trooper with us today, Ruchi, and I will turn the stage over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today and speak with you a little bit about my career so far. Thanks, Scott, especially to Scott because he had a lot to do with the beginning parts of my career. So we'll jump into this. I started off as actually an engineer student, major at NC State University, switched tracks and landed at the UNC Chapel Hill for my pharmacy program a while ago, and then soon after that I decided to pursue my master's, and I'll talk about that in more detail at The Ohio State University. My master's program was a program that I hope that you have heard of. It's a health system pharmacy administrative residency. It is a PGY 1 and 2. Combined with the master's program, which is a didactic component over at The Ohio State University with the MHA students over there. And it was a really interesting program, grounded my career in management and administration. And I'll note for you guys that my residency practice site was at Nationwide Children's Hospital, so I was fortunate to have a lot of exposure into pediatrics early on in my career, and that's certainly helped me as well. My first job after residency training and my master's program was over at New York Presbyterian Hospital. It's the university hospital system for Cornell and Columbia, and they have about 5 hospitals in the system when I was there, and I was one of the corporate managers within the pharmacy structure over there. And since then, let's see, almost 2 years now, I've been at Deloitte as a healthcare consultant. Next slide.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Ruchi. So now that we know a little bit about you, what we'd like to do is find out a little bit more about the people who we have here on the phone. So I'm going to administer polls. You'll see a screen that'll pop up here. We'll do 2 of these. The first question is, which of the following describes your envisioned career goals in 5 years? So I will launch this survey, and if you could weigh in. So Ruchi, it looks like we're evenly balanced here at retail and clinical direct patient care as the 2 options, none in the pharmaceutical manufacturing, regulatory, or entrepreneurial.
Okay.
Startups at, yep, we're staying there even. So about 50-50 retail and clinical direct patient care, which I'll be honest is exactly the same way I would have answered the survey when I was kind of finishing out pharmacy school. And then the next survey that we have here is, I'll go to the next slide. Who do you think of when you hear leadership? And I will launch this survey. And we'll give about 30 seconds for everybody to weigh in here. And you're starting to get Heavy on Steve Jobs, and Dalai Lama, and President Obama. So no Carl Icahn and no Angela Merkel. Apparently there's no Germans on the phone with us today.
No Germans on the phone.
Yeah. So yeah, it looks like Steve Jobs and President Obama are the and Steve Jobs is the prevailing winner.
There's enough women on there, women leaders. Well, thank you. I know that there's a lot of students on the line, so I thought I would ask a question about where everyone's envisioned career path would take them. And I agree, Scott, that was exactly where I was, particularly based on what pharmacy school you're coming from. When I was at UNC Chapel Hill, we were pretty heavily focused on clinical pharmacy, so that's where I thought I was headed, and I kind of did head that way. And the second question was really just to kick off this, the content and the crux of my decisions in my career, and it all hinges upon leadership. And I put this fun little slide about the penguins of Madagascar because when I was watching this movie with my nephews, I thought to myself, like, the penguins were leaders, and who wouldn't want to follow them, right? So they knew what they were doing. They had awesome strategies in mind, and they're a lot of fun. So so I guess next slide, the point of my career moves is really hinged upon leadership. And early on in my career path, and why I chose my career path was I thought it was very palpable that the leaders and the preceptors and the deans and all these folks that I interacted with early on were just truly impactful people. And I was sort of turned on by how amazing their leadership styles are, and how they're able to understand the big picture. And that's what I appreciated in just my conversations with them. So I guess my leadership seed was planted when I took a non-traditional elective during pharmacy school, and I'll be honest, I did it because I was ready to take a little bit of a break and boost my GPA probably. And it was a pharmacy practice elective, and it was really great because they brought in folks in med safety and the hospital level, quality, outpatient, department leaders, and got to talk to folks that had real jobs that we never really were exposed to in pharmacy school, and that was my first exposure to it. After that, I decided to pursue an internship at with Stan Kent, which I hope some of you have heard of. He's one of our past presidents at ASHP, but I was his first intern at the North Shore system. I think he's high up there, VP in pharmacy. And I was his first intern, and he gave me all these like administrative projects. I didn't quite get it and understand what the goal was, but he was one of the key persons in shaping my career path. I just was able to recognize how humble of a leader he is and how impactful, and his ability to problem solve and have followers and influence people was great, and that led to a impactful pharmacy department, and that was cool. And like I mentioned, I pursued a residency and master's in pharmacy administration, and I guess that's what I would call drinking the Kool-Aid. So I jumped right in, and part of our experience there was to really go back and understand the leaders who have shaped our profession. And I reference at the bottom the Harvey A.K. Whitney Award series, and those are available online for anyone to read, and they're essentially lectures that are given by folks that are awarded each year. And I've highlighted for you Sarah White's quote in her address. And real quickly, every pharmacist must be a leader in their practice or on their shift. Each must connect with their inner drive for passion and make things better. And so that really resonated with me when I was in my training, because proved to me that you can be at any position and carry a leadership baton. And so I saw that within the technicians I worked with that were stellar and made me a better pharmacist, and as well as my manager. So I think it's important to recognize the impact of leadership at any position. The other thing I wanted to point out really quickly is because I was at Nationwide Children's Hospital, which is a stellar pediatric institution, it taught me the lessons of patient care and what it's about to be a family and patient-centric center. And it made me understand what my role was in the healthcare spectrum, or what I wanted it to be. And so I just want to mention that for you guys to consider as well, is think about where you want your career to go and what you want your role to be. Next slide. So the next slide is about what I learned from residency. So this is also another little bit of cheesy fun fact, but my director, Carl Kapler, made me read this message to Garcia, which I didn't understand. He always referenced it. It's back from like 1898 or something. But essentially, it's a story about back then when there was, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the entire story, but President McKinley had a strategic vision with some Cuban rebels, if I remember, and there was a Spanish war that was about to ensue. And to make a long story short, there was a message he needed to get to a General Garcia who was posted somewhere far away in a jungle of a mountain in a foreign land. And they entrusted Captain Rowan with this task of getting this message to some general in a jungle. So long story short, after I read the story, which my director told me to read after I asked him a bunch of questions on how to get an audit done, the bottom line of the message is that Captain Rowan had delivered the letter and completed his task with absolutely no instructions on how to get it done or how to find Garcia. And that was an important point to remember because it really shaped my work ethic and driving myself to figure out answers rather than asking. It forced me to make decisions myself and think through processes clearly, gather information appropriately, and make an informed decision and present those to my manager, to my colleagues before I come forward with a bunch of questions. And so quite honestly, at the end of the day, I think that's like one of the biggest things I learned in residency. And then the second thing I would put on there is how to be a good manager. And this is really partly mostly driven from my didactic component, or the master's program, where we studied, you know, what is a good manager, organization behavior stuff. So what does it mean to be fair, how your communication skills need to be transparent, how do you garner support and lead by example. So these are all concepts that are studied, and there's a lot of research behind them. And it was really interesting to be in a program to sit down and learn how to be a good manager and then have the residency program to apply those skills. So those are probably the two things that I've learned through residency, and it's carried me forward through my career. So why I chose my first job, oh gosh, Scott, let me know if I'm getting close on time, but I'll try to run through this. So why I chose my first...
15 minutes to the end, so 5 more minutes to get to the last survey question.
Okay. Okay. So I chose my first job real quickly. Clinical informatics, I thought, was pharmacists have to be opportunists and find ways as healthcare evolves to be impactful. And I thought clinical informatics was pretty cool in the sense that you can apply changes at a global level and impact real-time patient changes or provider changes. And that to me was powerful. And so the other thing my first job allowed me to do is develop my goals at becoming a pharmacy leader. So the position was across the health system. I felt that it allowed me to influence my colleagues, influence and shape the department, have a health systems impact, and it also allowed a lot of relationship building across disciplines. And I had a quality and safety hat for the organization as well. So that is my last job in a nutshell. So with my last job, I think next slide. Why I chose my next step is I guess I got to a 5-year point, 6-year point, and I thought to myself, I'm ready to try out something else. And most people forget that they need to pay attention to their strengths. And I listed a few here that I've received feedback on from my performance evaluations. So I'm going to just leave you with that same thing. So as you're going through life, when you interact with your preceptors and managers, whoever you work with, focus on what strengths they tell you have. And yeah, you should continue to improve on your weaknesses and have a plan for that, but I do think that you should choose a career path that highlights your strengths. The other thing is your interests and what drives you, and I've listed my interests at the bottom, and that's kind of why I chose my next steps. On the next slide, I am highlighting what I felt I needed in my skill set or my toolbox to get to the next step. And so these are some things that you want to put into your resume, what you think are your skill sets, and this is just something that I've highlighted for you, and that I highlight when I am trying to leverage my past experiences. And at that point, I wanted to move laterally in the hospital structure to pursue hospital management in operations or in the quality department. So that was basically my next goal, to take a step outside of the pharmacy department, but continue to work on quality issues. And so that is why I decided to pursue a career in consulting. I think it's a fabulous way to make that next step within healthcare. And on the next slide, I have a link to what it's like to be in consulting. It's just a little bit of fun for you guys to take a look at later. But why I like consulting and what consulting is like is it's a big problem-solving challenge. It is very challenging. It's fun to help clients get there. You're working on operations issues, you're working on strategic goals that they might have. There's so many changes going on in healthcare with, I guess, Obamacare, quality changes, payment reform models. So there's always something to work on, and organizations are pressed to cut their costs. So I can expand on consulting some more, but that was kind of why I wanted to get to consulting. On the next slide, I've listed a few things why I like consulting, and I mentioned those a few already. That it allows me to work on challenging problems and strategic goals of an organization, and that makes me develop my own breadth of experience and develop my expertise. And in the future will allow me to take my career in any direction, having consulting in my background. But primarily I want to mention is that in the beginning, my goals have always been, how do I improve patient care? How do I drive better and larger impact? And that's kind of what still drives me today. And it's also very fun to help organizations and my clients reach their goals. So on the next slide, I've listed some advice, and I've mentioned that throughout the presentation for you, but please do focus on what excites you and think about how you can gain the experiences you want to get to the next step. It has to be a very thoughtful process as you shape your career. And as you're moving on from being a student to your next steps. It has to be your time and energy in your own development. And I think that was a very rude awakening for me, because as a student, you're used to being fed information. You know what the expectations are. You know what you got to do to get an A. You know, it's all clear. But when you're out there working, it's a little different, and you're the only person pushing yourself. So go above and beyond in your role, whatever it is, and provide leadership is something that I like to recommend to all pharmacists. And then lastly, I will say build relationships, whether they're in your career, outside your career, I'm sorry, not in your career, in your department or outside of your department, because you never know who you might have a conversation with that will open up doors for your next career step. And then lastly, I just want to leave you all with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. I think that the most important single ingredient in your success is knowing how to get along with people, and that really is about my last point of building relationships. And when you find yourself out of the student environment, you'll see that, you know, it's a people's game, and who you can connect with and build relationships will benefit you. So that's all I have for today.
Excellent.
Happy to Okay, go ahead, Scott.
So we have our last poll question here to see where you would like to take the rest of the conversation. So would you like Dr. Tiwari to cover more on her career background, more on her consulting practice, or more on working for a firm like Deloitte? You can answer now. We'll give you about 15 more seconds. So Ruchi, we'll go through this. If you could run through this in maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll turn over to questions, and I've got a quick little placeholder question while we wait for others to come in as well. And it looks like the overwhelming majority here wants to hear more about your current day consulting practice, the types of things that you work on there.
Things I work on currently.
Yeah.
Sure. I won't go into too much detail because I'm not allowed to, but I will say that expanding on what I mentioned about healthcare challenges, so I still like to practice in the hospital setting. So my clients are hospitals, and right now they're focused with the quality type of problems that you might expect that drive, if you solve them, drive cost savings. So how do you get your readmissions rate down? How do you get patients out the door faster, more efficient, so you can keep your costs for the organization down? How do you leverage your team, your multidisciplinary team members effectively to do that? So for example, you know that moving patients around, having them mobile, will probably get them better, quicker, faster. We need to provide patients with physical therapy in a hospital setting to do that. And so restructuring that department so patients can have access to appropriate physical therapy is one of those levers you can use to get patients moving around and better, faster. So that's an example. One of the pharmacy examples I'll use, this is probably going to resonate with a lot of people on the phone, is that, you know, we've all heard of sedation management and ventilator bundles and how do we get patients off ventilators faster. These are some of the clinical problems I've worked on, and they occur at all of the organizations. You know, we could all probably do better at it, leveraging nursing and pharmacists at the bedside to do that more effectively, and to open up that ownership of that role to nursing and pharmacy does do that. And we do it with an eye on measurement, so we are able to track how impactful that is versus, you know, oh, we should do it because the clinical trial said to, or the new quality data said to. So we solve the problems, but we also have an eye on measurement and making sure there's impact. So those are quality type problems I've worked on. More strategic problems would be, for example, CMS has just released bundle payments for hip and knee surgeries, and they're only going to provide one payment for patients up 90-day, let's say, all the costs that they incur in the 90-day period, which is inpatient and outpatient. So how is that going to impact an organization moving forward, and what do they need to do to make sure that they are maintaining their bottom line? So we help organizations do that modeling and exercise and make sure that they're prepared for these changes, and whether they're due to the regulatory environment or so have you. There's also another example is, like, if you have a specialized service or a program, let's say if you're the best, like CF Center, Cystic Fibrosis Center for pediatrics in your region, and there's competition out there, how do you get better at it? How do you attract more patients? And healthcare is a little bit of a business too, so that's part of it. It's fun. So I hope those are 3 examples that will help the students understand consulting a little better. And then there's also, pharma, there's health plans, and I don't typically work in that area, but we have a ton of pharmacists in that area as well, or those areas.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ruchi. So at this point, we'll move to a brief Q&A. If you can type in your questions in the question or in the chat feature in your browser. And Ruchi, while we're waiting for the first question there, I have a one for you. I think it was really interesting the way that you described how you recommend pharmacists be opportunistic. And I've never actually used that word in talking to the students that I get the pleasure of working with. But man, that's spot on. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you really mean by being opportunistic?
Yeah, sure. I think that there's a lot of problems that are inherent in healthcare, right? Healthcare is a very challenging, complex environment. And pharmacists are in this unique position of not always owning every step in the process, right? So we have our step in the process typically, but we are aware of everybody else's role and where they might hiccup or where they do things well. And I think because of our role and having that oversight capability, the big picture, we are able to step into different areas quickly. You don't see folks in PT rehab. You do see folks in nursing moving into a lot of these different areas, but overall, I think that pharmacists do it well, and so do nurses. So as you see a challenge, as we see challenges occurring, whether it's like, with our providers or a financial issue or an IT issue, I think pharmacists do a great job of shifting, putting on different hats to solve a problem. I think we're good at problem solving. So that's what I would like to continue to recommend to folks who want to pursue non-traditional career paths.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. The advice that I give is very similar in that a lot of what healthcare reform is creating a wild, wild west environment, and being an opportunist, I'm gonna steal that word from you, and really taking control of the things that you see that need to be done, as opposed to waiting for someone to hand it to you, is where a lot of people are going to find a lot of career success and career fulfillment. I think that's spectacular.
Yeah, and I would just add is that a lot of our colleagues, our multidisciplinary colleagues, may not always step up to those roles. I think nursing does it well, but a lot of folks just kind of, sit back and wait to be called upon, and I think pharmacists do participate. So.
Well, we've got one question here on the line, and I'll paraphrase a little bit, but it's a pretty basic question. Do you work at one hospital or more than one hospital?
When at my level, I am typically at one hospital at a time. So our usual engagements are about 3 months. My current one is about a year long right now. So, but I will go from hospital to hospital when I'm done with the changes that I need to implement or putting in my recommendations, and then we'll go to the next place. But there are folks, when you get up to the senior level and partner level, you will jump around and manage multiple projects at one time.
Looks like that's all the questions that we have here on the line. I'll give people maybe one more second, and while we're waiting for that, want to extend you a sincere thank you, Ruchi, Dr. Tiwari. As a small token of our thanks, we've made a donation in your honor to the charity of your choice, the National Foundation of Transplants, an excellent charity here, obviously based in healthcare. We're very grateful for you taking the time to share your experience and insight, and thank you for being willing to share your contact information as well. It does look like we have no more questions here on the line, so with that, I'll thank our folks here on the phone. Again, Dr. Tiwari, thank you so much, and we look forward to having folks on with us at the very first Wednesday in August for our next session. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you all.
Thanks, Scott.